I'm not someone who talks about feelings easily. I'd rather draw you a diagram. I'd rather show you an equation. I'd rather grab a piece of chalk and fill a blackboard with something you can actually check, something you can verify, something that doesn't ask you to take it on faith, because faith has never been my strong suit. I like things I can test. I like things that push back when you push on them. I like reality in all its stubborn, inconvenient, magnificent difficulty. But after Arlene died, my wife, my first real love, the one who laughed when I was being pompous and meant it kindly, who used to send me puzzles through the mail when I was working on the Manhattan Project, because she knew my brain needed something to chew on besides the terrible thing we were building. After she died, I found myself doing something that would have embarrassed me in a lecture hall, something I would have dismissed if a student had told me they were doing it. I started talking to the physics. Not to her. I want to be clear about that, because I'm not interested in lying to you, even a comfortable lie, even a lie that makes the next 10 minutes easier. I didn't talk to Arlene. I'm a physicist. I know what death does to the biological machinery that makes a person, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise just to make you feel better. That's not respect. That's condescension in a soft voice. But I talked to the structure. I talked to the equations. I asked them the way you ask a problem when you're really stuck, when you've been staring at it so long that you stop performing intelligence and start actually thinking. I asked them what they had to say about where she was. Not her soul, not her spirit. I don't have a framework for those things. I asked about her moments, about the specific, irreplaceable, unrepeatable events of her existence, about the Tuesday afternoon in a hospital in Albuquerque, when she was dying and I was sitting next to her, and there was a moment, I don't know what to call it, a moment of extraordinary ordinariness, when she just looked at me and smiled the way she did when she thought I was being serious about something I should have been laughing at. I asked the physics, is that moment gone? And here is what I found. Here is what 40 years of looking at how reality actually works, really looking, not just calculating, but here is what it told me, quietly, without fanfare, in the language of differential equations and space-time geometry and thermodynamic law. No, it is not gone. And I want to spend the next 50 minutes, if you'll give me that, explaining exactly what I mean by that. Not as comfort, not as a pretty story you can tell yourself at 3 in the morning when the grief is loudest, but as physics. As the actual, mathematical, experimentally verified structure of what time is, what existence means, and what happens to a moment after it happens, because I think you've been carrying a misunderstanding. And I think that misunderstanding is making the weight heavier than it needs to be. Not all of the weight. The grief is real. I'm not here to take your grief away, and I wouldn't if I could, because I've come to believe, and I'll explain this later, that grief is not a wound. Grief is the most precise measurement instrument human beings have ever developed for detecting what was real. And I wouldn't take your measurement instrument away from you any more than I'd take a physicist's spectrometer away because it was showing him something painful. But I think the interpretation, the story you're telling yourself about what the grief means, about what happened to the person you're measuring, I think that story is wrong in a specific, correctable, physics-informed way. And I want to correct it. So let me start where I always start when I'm trying to understand something, not with the answer, but with the question. And the question is this. 1. The one that changed everything for me, sitting in that hospital room, later, after, in the terrible quiet afterward. The question is, what does the universe actually do with a moment after it happens? Think about that for a second. Really think about it. Don't let your brain jump to the comfortable answer. The moment passes. It's in the past. It's over. That's not an answer. That's a grammatical habit dressed up as physics. What does the universe do with the past? Where does it go? Does it get deleted? Does it get stored somewhere? Does it keep existing in some form we don't have good language for yet? I want to tell you what I think. I want to tell you what the equations suggest. But I want to get there the right way, which means I want to start with a story. Because I've found, in 60 years of trying to explain physics to people who didn't already know it, that the best way into a hard idea is through something you can see with your imagination first, and then we sharpen it with the mathematics. And then we live with it, and see if it changes anything. Here's the story I want to tell you first. It's about a library. You've heard of the Library of Alexandria. Most people have. At least, it was built in Egypt, in Alexandria, obviously somewhere around the 3rd century before the Common Era. And it was, for its time, the closest thing humanity had ever built to an organized attempt to collect and preserve all human knowledge. Not just the knowledge of one culture, one city, one tradition, but everything, scrolls from Greece and Persia and Egypt, and wherever else they could get them. Hundreds of thousands of scrolls, every significant work of philosophy, mathematics, medicine, history, poetry, drama that the ancient world had produced. And it burned. Exactly how and when historians still argue about. It wasn't one dramatic night, it was probably a gradual decline, punctuated by several fires, some accidental, some deliberate, over several centuries. But the result was the same. The Library of Alexandria was destroyed. The scrolls were burned. The knowledge was lost. And this is one of history's great laments, right? We talk about it the way we talk about extinction. Something irreplaceable. Gone. Humanity set back centuries, maybe. Entire fields of inquiry reduced to ash. Imagine, people say, what we might have known by now if Alexandria had survived. I want you to feel that loss for a moment. Really feel it. The specific texture of it. Not just books were destroyed, but the particular horror of a thing that existed, that was real. That people wrote and thought and built and refined over generations, and then it's just gone. That feeling. Hold on to it, because it's related to the feeling we're really talking about today. Now I want to introduce you to a problem in physics that has kept some of the smartest people alive up at night for decades. It's called the black hole information paradox. And I know that sounds like I'm taking a sharp left turn away from Alexandria and grief and everything I just said, but bear with me, because this is the pivot point. This is where the story and the science start to become the same thing. Here is the problem, as simply as I can put it. When you drop something into a black hole, an object, any object, the black hole eventually evaporates. Stephen Hawking showed this in 1974, one of the most important theoretical discoveries of the 20th century. Black holes aren't forever. They slowly radiate energy. We call it Hawking radiation, and over an almost incomprehensibly long period of time they shrink and eventually disappear. Now, here's the question, what happened to the information that was in the object you dropped in? When I say information, I mean the specific physical description of that object, the arrangement of its atoms, its quantum state, everything about it that made it that particular thing and not some other thing. Did that information get destroyed when the black hole evaporated? Or did it somehow survive, encoded in the Hawking radiation, scrambled almost beyond recovery, but still fundamentally present? This question, and I want you to understand this is not a philosophical question, it's a precise mathematical one, divided the physics community for decades. Hawking himself initially argued that the information was destroyed, that a black hole could genuinely erase information from the universe, that the universe had, in other words, a delete function. And almost every other physicist in the world said, no, that can't be right. Because if information can be destroyed, truly fundamentally destroyed, then the mathematical framework of quantum mechanics breaks down. The equations stop working. And quantum mechanics is the most precisely verified theory in the history of science. We've tested it to 11 decimal places. It doesn't break. Hawking eventually conceded in 2004. The information is not destroyed. It survives. It is preserved in the outgoing radiation in a form so scrambled that recovering it would be, in practice, essentially impossible. But theoretically, fundamentally, it is still there. The universe, it turns out, does not delete. Now come back to Alexandria with me. Come back to those burned scrolls, and ask yourself, what burned? The papyrus burned, the ink burned, the physical substrate that was carrying the information was destroyed. But what about the information itself? The specific arrangements of marks that constituted those ideas? The patterns that represented everything that was written in that library? In the strictest physical sense, every photon of light that carried the image of those scrolls is still traveling, right now, through space. The light that reflected off the surfaces of those pages, the actual electromagnetic radiation that made those scrolls visible to the human eyes that read them, that light has been traveling outward from Alexandria for 2,000 years. It has dispersed, become unimaginably faint, scrambled into noise by the chaos of its journey. But it has not been deleted. The universe has not deleted it. The information exists somewhere, in some form, in the structure of what happened. Now, I want you to make the turn I've been building toward. Your loved one was not a scroll. They were not a library. But they were information, the most important kind of information. Not words on papyrus, but the specific, unrepeatable arrangement of a consciousness, a personality, a way of being in the world that existed for a certain number of years and interacted with everything around it and left traces, measurable physical traces, in the universe it moved through. And the question I sat with after Arlene died, the question I'm inviting you to sit with right now, is this. If the universe cannot delete the information in a scroll, if the greatest minds in physics agree that even a black hole cannot truly erase what existed, then what happened to her, to the specific, unrepeatable pattern of her, to the moments she generated, the light she reflected, the changes she made to the physical state of everything she touched? If the universe doesn't delete scrolls, why would it delete people? I'm not going to answer that question yet. I want you to sit with it, feel its weight and its strangeness, because the discomfort of not immediately having an answer is actually, and this is something I believe deeply, as a scientist and as a human being who has sat in a lot of uncomfortable uncertainty, the discomfort of not having an answer is the beginning of actually understanding something. It means you found a real question, and real questions are rarer and more valuable than almost anyone appreciates. Let me tell you the second story. This one is more personal, and I tell it with some reluctance because I'm more comfortable with diagrams than confessions. But I think it matters here. When I was a young physicist, young enough to be arrogant, which is young indeed, I had a completely mechanical relationship with time. Time was a variable. It was the t in the equations. It was the thing you put in the denominator when you were calculating velocity. It had no emotional content for me, no philosophical weight. It was just a coordinate, a direction. The fourth one, after the three spatial ones, you'd tell me something happened in the past, and I'd think, yes, t is smaller there. That's all. The past is where t is small. The future is where t is large. Right now is where I happen to be. Next question. And then I started working seriously through the mathematics of special relativity, not just using it as a tool. I'd been doing that for years, but really following it, asking it questions the way you ask a witness questions when you're not sure you trust them yet, when you're pressing on everything they say to see if it holds together. And it did hold together. The mathematics of special relativity is extraordinarily consistent and extraordinarily strange. And one of the things it says loudly, if you're listening, if you follow the implications all the way, is this: there is no universal now. Let me explain what that means. Because it sounds like a philosophical provocation, and it isn't. It's a precise mathematical statement. In classical physics, the physics of Newton, the physics that governed our understanding of the world for 250 years, time is absolute. There is a fact about what is happening right now everywhere in the universe simultaneously. If I ask you, what is Jupiter doing right now? There is a correct answer. Right now, as I speak these words to you, Jupiter is doing a specific thing. We might not know what it is, but it's doing it. Now is now for everyone and everything. Einstein showed that this is not true. What now means, what events are simultaneous with this moment, depends on your state of motion. Two observers moving relative to each other will, if they're careful and honest, genuinely disagree about what is happening at the same time, not because of communication delays, not because of measurement errors, but fundamentally at the level of how reality is structured. Simultaneity is not absolute. Now is not a fact about the universe. Now is a relationship between an observer and the universe. And when you take this seriously, when you follow it all the way, it has an implication about the past that I find both vertiginous and, in a strange way, comforting. If now is not absolute, if what counts as the present depends on the observer, then the past being definitively over is also not absolute. The past being gone is a statement that makes sense only relative to a specific observer. For a different observer, moving differently through space-time, what you call the past might fall in a region they'd call the present, or even the future. Now, I want to be careful here, because I don't want to mislead you, and I never want to give you comfort that doesn't survive contact with reality. The mathematics does not say that you can go back. It does not say that the past is accessible from where you are. The physics is quite clear that for you, here, now, in your reference frame, the events of the past are indeed in your past, and you cannot travel there. But it says something different from gone. It says inaccessible from here. Think about what those two phrases feel like in your body. Gone versus inaccessible from here. Gone is a closed door. Gone is deletion. Gone means the thing never existed anymore, even though it did exist before. Gone is the word we use for things the universe has finished with. Inaccessible from here means the thing is still there. It's real. It occupies a location in space-time rather than in space, but a location nonetheless, and the reason you can't reach it has nothing to do with whether it exists. It has to do with where you are and the direction you can move from here. This is not a semantic game. The distinction matters practically, emotionally, physically, because gone and inaccessible from here are not the same problem, and you solve them differently, and you live with them differently. I want to give you the name for the physics that supports this, because you deserve the actual terminology. You deserve to be able to look it up, push on it, find physicists you trust, and ask them about it. The framework is called eternalism, or the block universe. And it is not a fringe position. It is the most mathematically natural interpretation of what Einstein's equations actually say about the nature of time. Here is what eternalism says. In our universe, time is a dimension, not a river, not a direction of flow, a dimension like the three spatial dimensions we can navigate physically, left, right, forward, backward, up, down, but a fourth one that our consciousness moves through in one direction at a certain rate. In a space-time block universe, all moments in time exist, past, present, and future. They all have the same kind of existence. The only thing special about now is that it's where you happen to be, but that doesn't make other moments less real, any more than Los Angeles being where you are right now makes New York less real. The flip book is the best analogy I've found. Imagine one of those old flip books, the ones where you flip the pages quickly and the drawings seem to move, seem to animate. There's a little cartoon figure running, or a bird flying, or two stick people shaking hands. You flip the pages and you feel time passing in that little cartoon world. You feel motion, you feel sequence. But here's the thing, all the drawings were always there. Page 14 was always page 14. The running figure in that drawing didn't disappear when you flipped to page 15. It's still there. The book contains all of it simultaneously. Your thumb moving through the pages is what generates the experience of time passing. But the pages themselves, all of them, exist. In the block universe, every moment in time is a page. Every moment that has ever existed, every moment that you have ever lived, every moment that the person you loved has ever lived, every single one of them is a page in the book. Fixed, permanent, present in the sense that a page is present even when your thumb isn't on it. Your loved one's life is not a story that ended. It is a set of pages that exist, that will always exist. The book doesn't lose its pages when you finish reading. Now, I can already feel the objection forming, and I want to honor it because it's a real objection and not a small one. The objection is, this is all very well, Feynman, and the mathematics is probably right, but what good does it do me? I can't go there, I can't visit those pages, I can't talk to them. I can't hear their voice or feel their hand or sit across the table from them. So what difference does it make that the moment exists if I can't access it? This is a genuine, serious, important objection, and I want to answer it carefully. Not by dismissing it, but by reframing what you're actually asking for. Because I think what you're really asking, underneath the specific request for the voice, the hand, the presence of the table, what you're really asking is, did it matter? Was it real? Is the universe the kind of place where love leaves a mark, or is it the kind of place where everything that happens is eventually ground to nothing, erased, forgotten by the cosmos, even if not by us? That's the question underneath the grief. That's the question underneath the objection. And I think it's one of the most important questions a human being can ask. And the physics has a real answer. Yes, it was real. And yes, it left a mark. Let me tell you about light. One of the things I love most about physics, one of the things that has never stopped being astonishing to me, even after a lifetime of working with it, is what the finite speed of light actually implies about time and observation. Light travels fast, extraordinarily fast by any human standard, roughly 300,000 kilometers per second. But it's not infinite. It has a speed, and that speed means that what we see when we look at something is always the past. When you look at the moon, you're seeing the moon as it was about 1.3 seconds ago. The light that's hitting your eyes right now left the moon's surface 1.3 seconds ago. You're not seeing the moon now. You're seeing the moon then. When you look at the sun, you're seeing it as it was 8 minutes ago. If the sun were to somehow vanish at this exact moment, just wink out of existence, you wouldn't know for 8 minutes. You'd sit here in the sunshine of a star that was already gone. When you look at the nearest star beyond our sun, Proxima Centauri, you're seeing it as it was 4 years ago. When you look at the Andromeda galaxy with your naked eye on a dark night, you're seeing light that left it 2.5 million years ago. The galaxy you're seeing is 2.5 million years in the past. Dinosaurs were 2.5 million years in the past. You're seeing that far back. And this means something wonderful and strange. It means that if there were a civilization, a genuinely alien civilization, far enough away from us, with telescopes powerful enough to resolve individual events on the surface of our small blue planet, they could look toward Earth right now and see things that we call the past. From a civilization 100 light-years away, looking at Earth with a perfect telescope, the signal that is arriving right now is the Earth of 100 years ago. They are, from their perspective, watching 1924. They are watching live the events of a century ago. The people who lived then, their movements, their cities, their faces turned up toward the sky, all of that is arriving at that alien telescope right now as a present-tense observation. From 200 light-years away, they're watching 1824. Napoleon is recent history. The Industrial Revolution is just beginning. From 2,000 light-years away, they're watching roughly the time of Julius Caesar. Now, here is the thing I want you to really sit with. The specific day your loved one was born. The specific day, if you can recall it or imagine it, that some crucial thing happened between you. The first time you saw them. The last time you saw them. From the right location in the universe. From far enough away. That day is not the past. That day is the present. That day is arriving, right now as current signal, at some point in space-time. Your loved one's existence is still radiating outward. The light of their life, literally the photons that bounced off their face, that carried their image, that made them visible in the physical sense, that light is still traveling. It has spread and diluted to the point of being undetectable without instruments we don't have and may never have. but it is there. The universe has not deleted it. The universe never deletes anything. The moments of their life are not in the past in some absolute, final, cosmic sense. They are in your past, which is a specific, relative, observer-dependent statement. From the perspective of the physics, from the perspective of the structure of space-time itself, those moments are fixed coordinates, real locations, as real as the location of any star. We are not holding memories of something that no longer exists. We are holding memories of something that exists at a different coordinate. And those are not the same thing. Now I want to talk about what grief actually is, because I think, and this is maybe the most important thing I want to say today, the thing I most want to leave with you, I think we have fundamentally misidentified what grief is, and that misidentification is making it harder to carry. We talk about grief as though it is the experience of loss, as though it is what happens when something is taken away, as though grief is the negative space where a person used to be. The whole, the absence, the deletion. And yes, there is that. I don't want to dismiss the reality of that feeling. The absence is real. The silence where their voice used to be is real. The empty chair is real. The reaching for the phone to call them and remembering again that the phone won't help, that's real and it's excruciating, and I'm not going to tell you it isn't. But I think that's not all grief is. I think grief is also something else, something that runs underneath the experience of absence, like bedrock underneath soil. And what it is this. Grief is the record of contact. Grief is what interaction looks like in a physical system after the direct contact has ended. Grief is the shape that another life pressed into yours while you were together, still visible now that the press has lifted. Let me explain what I mean with a piece of physics called quantum entanglement. Quantum entanglement is the strangest thing in a field that is wall-to-wall strange. Here is what it says. When two quantum particles interact, when they come into contact in the technical sense of that word, they become entangled. Their quantum states are no longer fully independent. They share a wave function. And what this means in practice is that what you do to one particle affects the state of the other particle, even when they are separated, even when they are on opposite sides of the room. Even, and this is the part that drove Einstein crazy, he called it spooky action at a distance, even when they are on opposite sides of the galaxy. The interaction changes both of them. Permanently. The entanglement persists across separation. The particles no longer have fully independent existences because they have a shared history of contact. Now, I need to say again, you are not a quantum particle. Your loved one was not a quantum particle. The rules of quantum mechanics apply to the very small, and the quantum effects that govern individual particles average out to classical behavior at the scale of human beings. I'm not telling you that you and your loved one are literally quantum entangled, but you are made of particles. Everything you are, every neuron, every atom of your body, every piece of the biological machinery that processes your experience of the world, is made of particles that obey these rules at the fundamental level. And the interactions that constituted your relationship, every conversation, every shared meal, every argument, every forgiveness, every moment of being in the same room, breathing the same air, those interactions changed the physical state of every atom involved. In the most literal sense available to a physicist, they left a mark on you. At the level of matter, your nervous system is physically, neurologically, measurably different from what it would have been if this person had never existed. The pattern of your neural connections, the specific architecture of your brain that encodes your memories, your habits, your ways of responding to the world, was shaped at the physical level by the existence of another person. The interaction was real. The mark is real. Your grief is not just emotional evidence that you loved someone. Your grief is physical evidence. It is the impression their existence left in your matter. When you feel grief in your chest, that particular heaviness, that specific constriction that people have been feeling and trying to describe in poetry for as long as there has been poetry, you are feeling the shape of another life that became entangled with yours. You are not measuring absence. You are measuring presence. that has changed form. This is not a small distinction. Think about it. If grief is absence, if grief is just the gap, the nothing where someone used to be, then the only thing you can do with grief is endure it until it fades, waiting for the measurement of nothing to become less acute, hoping the whole gets smaller, or filled with something else. That's the grief we've been taught to carry. The grief was wounded. The grief was a deficit. The grief is a problem to be solved by time's passage. But if grief is a presence that has changed form, if grief is the physical trace of genuine entanglement, then it has a different character entirely. It is not a whole. It is a record. It is not empty. It is in its own strange way full. It is carrying information about what was real, about how real it was, about the depth and texture and reality of a connection that was real enough to change your physical state at the level of neurons and atoms. And you don't solve a record. You don't heal a record. You learn to read it. I want to stay with this for a moment longer, because it connects to something that might initially sound cold, but I think is actually quite warm when you really sit with it. There is a principle in thermodynamics, the first law, that says energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only change form. This is one of the bedrock principles of physics, tested in every conceivable way over hundreds of years, and it has never been violated. Not once, not even approximately. The total amount of energy in a closed system is conserved. Always, without exception. Your loved one was a biological system, a living, breathing, metabolizing system that required and processed energy for every moment of their existence. The electrical energy of their thinking, the chemical energy of their moving and speaking and laughing, the thermal energy of their body heat, the kinetic energy of every gesture they ever made. Every word they ever spoke was, at the physical level, a compression wave in air molecules, energy changing form, moving from their body into the world. None of that energy has been destroyed. That is not possible. It has changed form. It has distributed. It has become part of the larger system again, the earth, the atmosphere, you, the people who knew them, the food that was grown in the soil, that was eventually shaped by the atoms their body returned to. The energy of their life is in the world right now. Literally, physically, measurably, if you had the instruments. Now, I know what the objection is. Energy isn't them, distributed energy isn't the person. You're not comforted by the fact that the heat from someone's body is still in the atmosphere somewhere. That's not what you're missing. And you're right. I'm not saying it is. I'm saying something more careful than that. I'm saying that what made them was never only energy. It was the specific organization of that energy, the pattern, the arrangement, and the question of where pattern goes when a system changes. That's a more interesting and more hopeful question than the question of where the energy goes. Because energy, when it disperses, loses its pattern. But pattern, in some forms, does not disperse when the energy does. Let me tell you about memory. Let me tell you what neuroscience and information theory actually say about what a memory is. Because I think the popular conception of memory is badly wrong in a way that has consequences for how we understand grief. We tend to think of memory as a recording, like a video file on a hard drive. The event happens, the camera records it, the file is stored, and when you remember, you play back the file. The past event is gone, but a recording of it persists in your brain. This is an emotionally intuitive model, and it is, in the most important ways, wrong. Memory is not a playback system. Memory is a reconstruction system. Every time you remember something, you are rebuilding it from scratch. Your brain takes a set of stored cues, fragments, impressions, emotional valences, and actively constructs the experience of remembering. The memory is not a file being retrieved. The memory is a process being run. It is dynamic, active, present tense construction of a past event. This has all sorts of implications for why memory is fallible and why eyewitness testimony is unreliable, but I don't want to go down that road today. What I want to draw your attention to is something else, something stranger and more important. If memory is a process, If remembering is an active construction rather than a passive playback, then what you're doing when you remember someone is not retrieving a stored record. You are generating a live instance of their patterns. You are running the program of who they were, inside your own neural hardware. Think about what that means. When you really remember someone, not a vague impression but a vivid, specific textured memory of who they were, you are running an active process inside your brain, that is, in a meaningful sense, a live execution of their characteristic patterns, their way of speaking, their sense of humor, their particular response to the world, their values, their rhythms. All of that was encoded into you through years of interaction, and when you remember them, you are not retrieving a static image. You are running a living model. This is not just poetry. The way your brain works when it processes a memory of a person is, to a significant degree, the same neural machinery that processed your direct experience of them. Some of the same neurons fire. Some of the same emotional systems activate. You are not thinking about them in an entirely separate way from how you experienced being with them. There is overlap. There is continuity. The person you loved distributed their patterns into everyone who loved them, into you most of all, probably. And those patterns are not static memories. They are active, running present tense processes in the neural architecture of the people who carry them. Every time you think of them, really think of them, you are not visiting a museum exhibit. You are running a program. And a program that runs is not gone. It is executing. I know this might sound strange, or maybe it sounds too abstract to be comforting. That's okay. I'm not asking you to feel immediately comforted. I'm asking you to consider that the framework you've been using, the framework that says the person is simply gone, deleted, erased, is not only emotionally devastating but scientifically inaccurate. And I'm asking you to consider that a more accurate framework might, over time, change the emotional landscape, not by erasing the pain, but by changing its meaning. Let me tell you something about how human beings change, about how ideas change us, because I've spent a lifetime watching this happen, in physics and in life. When I was learning quantum mechanics, really learning it, not just learning the calculations but confronting the implications, there was a moment, somewhere in the middle of trying to really understand what the wave function means, when something shifted. The world didn't look different, the equations didn't change. But my relationship to uncertainty changed. Before quantum mechanics was real to me, a problem to be solved, you were uncertain because you didn't have enough information yet, and you should go get more information. That's how classical physics trained you to think. After quantum mechanics became genuinely real to me, uncertainty was something different. It was structural. It was built into the nature of things. Uncertainty wasn't a gap in my knowledge. It was a feature of reality. And when I really absorbed that, something changed about how I moved through the world. I became more comfortable with not knowing, more genuinely curious and less anxious in the face of open questions. The physics changed my psychology. I'm suggesting something similar here. I'm suggesting that if you can really absorb, not just intellectually accept, but actually absorb the way you absorb a change in temperature or a shift in light, if you can absorb what the physics actually says about time and existence and what happens to moments, something might change. Not about the loss, not about the pain of inaccessibility, but about the meaning of the loss, about what the grief is measuring. Because I think the hardest thing about grief, the thing underneath the sadness, the thing that gives the sadness its specific unbearable character, is the suspicion that it doesn't matter, that the universe is indifferent, that the specific, irreplaceable, unrepeatable person you loved has been fed into the cosmic machinery and come out as nothing distinguishable, and that everything you felt was just biology, just chemistry, just the complicated way carbon-based life forms bond to each other for survival purposes, and that the universe neither noticed nor cared. That is the real terror, not the loss, the meaninglessness, and the physics taken seriously pushes back on that terror. Not by proving the universe cares. I can't do that. and I'd be lying if I tried, but by saying, the universe doesn't erase, the universe doesn't delete. The moments your loved one generated, the patterns they distributed, the traces they left in matter and in spacetime, those are real. They are fixed. They persist. The universe registered their existence in a way that cannot be undone. That's not the same as meaning, but it's not nothing. And I think for a lot of people who are in the worst of grief, having something real to hold on to that isn't an article of faith, something that can actually be checked, tested, pushed on, matters. It matters enormously. Now let me talk about something I've been circling around, and I want to address directly. Because it's the thing that complicates everything I've been saying in a way I find genuinely interesting rather than troubling. If their moments are fixed in space-time, if the block universe is real, if the past is inscribed and permanent and cannot be deleted, then what, exactly, are we mourning? If nothing is gone, if the moments all still exist, fixed at their coordinates in the four-dimensional structure of space-time, then why does it hurt so absolutely? Why does the grief feel like the presence of a void rather than the presence of something inaccessible? Why does loss feel like deletion rather than distance? I want to sit with this question rather than dismiss it, because it's telling us something important. Here's what I think is happening. The pain of grief is not primarily about the metaphysics of what happened to the person. It's about the relationship between you and them. And specifically, it's about the loss of a particular kind of presence, the co-presence that made them accessible to you. The fact of being in the same room, being on the other end of the same phone line, occupying overlapping slices of space-time in a way that allowed direct interaction. That kind of presence, the immediate, physical, interactive presence, is real, and it's gone. I won't say otherwise. The moments of it are fixed in space-time, but your ability to generate new moments of it has ended. And that is a genuine loss, a real subtraction from what your life contains going forward. I don't want to minimize that. But here is the thing I find interesting, and I want you to think about this carefully. You never had full access to them, even when they were alive, standing right in front of you. You could hear their voice, but you couldn't hear their thoughts. You could see their face, but you couldn't know their experience. You could be in the same room, but you could never be inside their consciousness, never fully inhabit their perspective, never completely close the gap between your experience of the world and theirs. Love, even at its most intimate, is always an act of faith across a gap you cannot fully close. Two separate consciousnesses reaching across the irreducible distance of being distinct selves. Death widened the gap. It did not create a new kind of gap. It increased the distance across a gap that was already, always, structurally there. And I find this strangely comforting, though I understand it might not land that way at first. Here's why I find it comforting. It means the love you developed, the capacity you built for holding someone across a gap you couldn't fully cross, is not suddenly useless. It's not like a skill that became obsolete when the circumstances changed. It's the same skill, the same capacity, just stretched further. Stretched to a distance that feels unbridgeable. But working with the same mechanism, you were always reaching across a gap to hold them. You've been doing it your whole relationship. The reaching is what love is, the gap got bigger. The reaching is still the same act. I'm going to tell you about something Arlene used to do. While I was working at Los Alamos during the war years, she was in a sanitarium in Albuquerque, dying of tuberculosis. We were separated by distance and circumstance, and the extraordinary secrecy of what was happening at Los Alamos, which I couldn't tell her about. I could visit on weekends when I could get transport, but mostly we communicated by letter. She used to send me puzzles, encoded messages. She'd cut up the letter and send it in the wrong envelope, or fold it in a way that required you to unfold it in a specific order to read it correctly, or use a code that required a key she'd send separately. It drove the censors at Los Alamos absolutely mad, and it delighted me, endlessly, because the puzzles were her. The specific flavor of the mischief, the specific intelligence of the encoding, the specific warmth underneath the teasing, that was Arlene, transmitted across a distance, arriving to me in a form I had to work to unpack. The gap between us in those years was real. The distance was real. The difficulty of the communication was real. But she was still there at the other end of it, still herself, still sending puzzles that were full of her particular way of being in the world. After she died, I wrote her a letter. I didn't address it anywhere. There was nowhere obvious to send it, but I wrote it, in the present tense. To her, not because I believed with certainty that she could receive it. I'm too much of a scientist for that kind of certainty in either direction, but because something in the structure of how I thought about her refused to shift entirely into past tense. Something new, or suspected, or hoped that she was not nowhere. She was somewhere. Somewhere I didn't have the coordinates for. Somewhere the letter couldn't physically reach. But somewhere. And the physics, as I came to understand it better in the years after, gave me a framework for that instinct. She was at fixed coordinates in the block universe. The moments we had were permanent. The patterns she had distributed into me were still running. The entanglement was still real even across the distance death creates. I was not wrong to reach. I was only wrong about what reaching meant. So I want to talk about what you can actually do with all of this. Not as a set of therapeutic exercises. I'm a physicist, not a therapist, and I want to respect that boundary, but as a set of natural consequences of the framework I've been building. Because I've found in my own life that understanding something genuinely changes behavior, that a real insight produces real changes in how you live. Not by effort, not by willpower, but naturally, the way understanding that a floor is stable under you changes how you walk on it. Here is the first thing. Change one word. Just one. When your mind generates the sentence, "they're gone," and it will, many times a day, because that's what minds do when they're processing loss, catch it, pause, and substitute a more physically accurate statement, not, "they're gone, they're out of range." This is not denial. I want to be very clear about that. Saying they're out of range doesn't mean you believe you can reach them, or that the loss isn't real, or that things will go back to how they were. It means you're using language that accurately describes the physics, rather than language that implies something the physics doesn't support. Gone means deleted. Gone means the thing has stopped existing, not just stopped being accessible. Gone is what happens to things the universe erases, and the universe doesn't erase. Out of range means the channel is closed, the access point is gone. The specific coordinates of your present moment are not near enough to the coordinates of their existence for direct interaction. That's a different statement. It's a true statement, and it lands differently in the body. Try it the next time the thought arrives, and it will arrive. Try swapping the word. Notice what shifts. Even if nothing shifts right away, you're training yourself in a more accurate relationship with reality. And accurate relationships with reality are, in my experience, always worth the effort. The second thing, I want you to choose a memory, not a general impression, not "I remember them as warm" or "I remember them as funny." A specific moment. The more ordinary, the better. The specific way they moved when they were about to tell a joke they were very pleased with. The particular way they held their coffee cup. One specific afternoon that you can almost smell, can almost feel the temperature of, if you close your eyes and let it come. Now hold this. That moment is not a memory of something that no longer exists. It is a record of a fixed point. It is a location that still exists, fixed at its coordinates in the block universe, permanent and unchangeable. You are not visiting ruins. You are holding the address of somewhere real. The difference in how you hold that memory, as a ruin or as an address, is subtle but significant. Ruins are what's left after something is gone. Addresses are where something still is. You're not mourning a ruin. You're carrying an address. Hold the memory that way. See if anything changes about its texture. I find, and this is personal, This is from my own experience of trying to live in alignment with what the physics says, rather than what the language of common grief assumes. I find that holding memories as addresses rather than as ruins changes my relationship to them. They feel less like losses and more like positions, less like holes and more like fixed stars. Still at a distance, still inaccessible, but there. The third thing, this one is the most active, the most forward-facing, and the one that took me the longest to understand, but that I now think is the most important. Ask yourself what they gave you. Not what you miss, that's important too, but it's a different question. What did they change in you? What tendencies, values, ways of seeing, habits of thought, emotional reflexes are different in you because they existed? What did the entanglement with their life install in your patterns that wouldn't be there otherwise? Make a list, a real one, not a eulogy, a physical inventory. What is actually different about how you move through the world because of the entanglement? What program did they install in you that's still running? Because here's the physics of it. Entangled particles don't unentangle when separated. The change in state caused by interaction persists. The mark is permanent. And every time you act from a value they gave you, every time you respond to the world in a way that reflects the patterns they distributed into you, you are running their program. You are extending their pattern into new moments. You are, in the information-theoretic sense, continuing their existence into parts of space-time they couldn't reach on their own. This is not symbolic. This is not living in their memory in the sentimental sense. This is what happens when a pattern persists in a system after the original substrate has changed. The pattern keeps running, in you, through you, forward. So the question becomes, what are you doing with what they gave you? What are you doing with the specific alteration they made to your physical self? Because that alteration is them, in a very real sense. And how you use it, what direction you run the program in, that determines what happens to their pattern next. I find this reframes grief in a way that adds something to it without taking anything away. The loss is still real. The inaccessibility is still real. The empty chair is still empty. But there is also something that runs, something that continues. And you have a relationship to it, you have a responsibility to it, if you want one. Not a burden, a relationship. The difference between those two words is the difference between weight and meaning. The fourth thing is the hardest, and I want to offer it gently because it goes against the instinct of everyone who is grieving. It goes against the instinct I had myself. Sit in the not knowing. Not the not knowing about whether they're somewhere, in a spiritual sense. I can't help you with that question, and I wouldn't presume to. Not knowing about the metaphysics of consciousness and what happens to it is a real, open, genuinely unresolved question that the physics I've been describing doesn't answer. The block universe tells us their moments are fixed. It doesn't tell us their experience of those moments persist. Those are different questions, but the not knowing I'm pointing at is this. You don't have to decide what happened to them. You don't have to choose between frameworks, religious, scientific, philosophical, poetic, and defend that choice against all comers. You don't have to know. The universe is vast, and mostly dark and full of things we haven't understood yet. And the question of what consciousness is and where it goes when the biological system that generates it changes its state is genuinely one of the most open questions in all of science. You are allowed to say, I don't know where you are. I know you were real. I know your reality left marks I can still read. I know the physics gives me no reason to believe you were erased. And I'm going to live in that open space, that honest uncertainty, rather than forcing myself into a certainty, in either direction, that my actual experience doesn't support. Because I've found, and this is a temperament thing as much as a physics thing, but it's also a physics thing, that genuine uncertainty is not the same as despair. Genuine uncertainty has room in it. It has possibility in it. It is not the same as knowing the answer is nothing. The people who will tell you with great certainty exactly what happened to your loved one after death, the very certain ones on all sides of that question, are making it up. I'd rather give you a real uncertainty than a false certainty. And a real uncertainty properly held can be lived in. It can become a home of sorts. The fifth thing, and the last, is the simplest. Write a sentence once a day for 30 days if you can manage it. Just one sentence. Beginning with, "I don't know where you are, but I know," and finish it with something true, something specific, something about them that was real, something about the mark they left, something about what they changed in you, something you noticed today that was inflected by their having existed, something small or something enormous, just something true, not a prayer, not a letter, not performance for anyone, including yourself, just a true sentence once a day that refuses to close every door, that insists on holding the uncertainty open, that keeps the channel of inquiry open, rather than shutting it with a conclusion you don't actually have evidence for. I found that writing to Arlene, even though I didn't address the letters anywhere, even though I'm a physicist who knows the mechanics of what death does to a biological system, I found that the writing kept something alive in me. Not her exactly, but my relationship to her, my ongoing engagement with her patterns, her influence, my responsibility to what she gave me. The writing was a practice of holding the uncertainty rather than filling it with something easier but less true. And easier but less true is not, in the long run, a kindness. It is a shortcut that leads you back to the same pain, because the shortcut doesn't actually address the real question. The real question is not whether you'll feel better in time. You will, probably, with time, feel differently. The real question is whether the framework you're living inside, the story you're telling yourself about what happened, is accurate enough to support you. Because a framework built on inaccuracies develops cracks, and grief presses on every crack. I want to give you a framework without cracks. Not a complete framework, I can't do that, nobody can, but one that doesn't require you to believe things the physics contradicts. And what the physics says, as carefully and honestly as I can put it, is this. The universe doesn't delete moments. The block universe is permanent, and the past is fixed. The energy of every life redistributes, but never disappears. The pattern of every person distributes into the people and the world they touched, and patterns that run in a system are real in the system. The entanglement of a genuine relationship changes the physical state of both parties permanently, and that change persists across separation. The light of a life is still traveling. The information is not destroyed. What you have lost is not them. What you have lost is the access point, the channel, the specific coordinates where your present moment and their presence used to overlap. That loss is real and devastating, and I will not in the same category as things the universe has deleted, because the universe hasn't deleted anything. It has changed address books. It has closed channels. It has altered the topology of who can reach whom. But it has not pressed delete. And you, with your grief, with your specific and physical evidence of entanglement that still runs in your neurons and your habits and your values and your ways of seeing, you are carrying the most precise record that exists of what was real about them. You are the instrument that measured their existence most closely, and the reading on the instrument is still there. Will always be there. Changed form, yes, evolved, but present. Your grief is not a wound to be healed. It is a reading to be honored, a measurement of what was real enough to change you at the level of matter. And you don't put a measurement away and forget it. You learn to read it more clearly. You learn to understand what it's measuring. You learn to live with the instrument you are, carrying the reading you carry, in a universe that, for all its vast and humbling indifference to individual lives, is also demonstrably, stubbornly, mathematically committed to not erasing what has been real. So here is where I want to land. Here is the thing I most want to leave with you, the thought I'd most want you to carry out of this room and into the specific, ordinary, difficult, beautiful days ahead of you. You've been carrying a word. You came in with it, probably. We all do. The word is gone. They're gone. He's gone. She's gone. The word that makes the loss feel like deletion, like the universe pressed a key and something was subtracted from reality's ledger. I want you to go out carrying a different word, not a denial of the loss. I'm not asking you to pretend the chair is occupied when it isn't, but a more accurate word, a word the physics supports. Fixed. They are fixed, their moments are fixed in the block universe. Their patterns are fixed in the people they loved. Their energy is fixed in the law that says energy cannot be destroyed. Their marks are fixed in the physical state of everyone whose life theirs touched. Their light is still traveling. Their signal is still radiating. Their existence happened in a universe that has never once in 14 billion years deleted what happened. Fixed is different from gone. Fixed means permanent. Fixed means the address still exists even when you can't visit it. Fixed means the moments you had were real in a way the universe acknowledges and maintains. They didn't vanish. The universe doesn't do that. They changed address. And you know the address, you carry it everywhere you go. You are not holding on to a ghost. You are holding on to a fixed point in time. That's not delusion. That's physics. And the grief you're carrying, the specific, heavy, textured, sometimes unbearable weight of it, is the most accurate measurement you have of how real it was. How real they were. How real you both were to each other. The pain is not a sign that something is wrong with you, that you're grieving too long or too hard or in the wrong way. The pain is a measurement, a reading on a very sensitive instrument, and the instrument is working exactly as it should. The question is not when the measurement will stop. The question is what you do with the reading. You carry it. You read it carefully. You let it tell you what was true. And then, and this is the part I believe most deeply, more than any equation, you run the program. You take the patterns they installed in you, the specific alterations their existence made to your physical self, and you run them forward, into your work, into your relationships, into the ordinary Tuesday afternoons that will come and come and come, each one another page in the flip book, each one another moment that will also, once it exists, be fixed, permanent, part of the unchangeable record of what was real. They are in all of it, fixed in time, running in you, still radiating outward, still in the physics. That is not a loss the universe has made whole. I would not insult you by suggesting the mathematics makes the grief smaller. The grief is the size it is because the love was the size it was, and nothing about the physics changes that arithmetic. But it is a loss you can carry differently, with the knowledge that what you're carrying is not the ash of something deleted, but the record of something permanent, the trace of something real, the continuing execution of a pattern that never fully belonged to only one person, and so could never fully end with one person. That is what I want to offer you, not comfort that dissolves under pressure, not faith that requires you to abandon your honest engagement with how things are, but a more accurate picture of how things are, a picture that the equations support, a picture that doesn't require deletion because the universe doesn't do deletion. They changed address. You carry the old address, and every time you live from what they gave you, you're mailing something forward from it, into the future, into the new moments that will also, once they happen, be fixed, permanent, part of what the universe maintains. That's the physics of love, and it's the best news I know how to offer. If something in this conversation landed for you, if something shifted, even slightly, even just an inch in the way you're holding this, I'd genuinely love to know what it was. Not because I need to know, but because I found, in all my years of trying to understand things and share them, that the places where understanding lands are different for each person. And the comments people leave on something like this tell me more about what matters than anything I could design in advance. Leave it there if you want to, whatever it is. And if you know someone who's carrying this weight, someone for whom the word gone has become a wall they can't see past, share this with them, not as advice, not as an answer, as company, as the suggestion that the physics, taken seriously, doesn't support the worst story they might be telling themselves about what the universe did with the person they loved. That's all. Thank you for giving me this time. It's the most important use of an afternoon I can imagine, sitting with the hard questions, not flinching away, following the implications wherever they lead. That's what physics taught me to do with the world, And I think it's not a bad way to approach grief, too. Now go run the program. They gave you something real. The universe recorded it. What you do next is a new page in the flipbook. Make it one they'd recognize.